Hello everyone, I'm Force McFreelava, and this is Speedplay France and Hearts of Iron 4, number 11. We left off invading the Soviet Union. We have made some decent progress thus far, having driven pretty considerably into the Soviet, I guess just frontier. We haven't really gotten into their heartland just yet, and in fact we are somewhat slowing down. We have managed a small breakout, which we're hopefully going to just be able to expand and hopefully engulf a decent amount of the Soviet military with. It is still the middle of winter, so it's likely that we will face some sort of debuffs and penalties for our attack, which is obviously not ideal. However, if we're still able to attack despite all of the debuffs, then when summer does come around, it should be the last summer of the Soviet Union. That is, of course, assuming we are able to keep up the momentum right now. And we have opened up a pretty wide corridor, so it's not as though we're at risk of getting encircled and destroyed. The AI, as always, is not really too keen on large actions that really turn the tide of the war, so I'm not too worried about our forces getting destroyed or encircled or what have you. The main thing is that we're going to have to just break through. If we're going to win this war, we're going to have to break through. Eventually, the Allies will probably run out of manpower. I actually have no idea how much manpower the Allies have, or how much manpower the Soviets have, for that matter. So, depending on what occurs, the entirety of the front line may just end up moving either east or west, depending on which side breaks first. So, since we don't really have very many forces on the front line, you'll notice very few of the units are ours, except for in reserve, just occupying the countries of Germany, Italy, and all the other Axis powers. It's not really going to matter so much our manpower. We also are going to build more military factories just to keep up production of our main forces. Our goal in this war, and really our role in this war, is not to take the majority of the casualties. It's not to be the largest force invading the Soviet Union. Our role is to be the edge of the spear, just to be the vanguard, really, the vanguard of the invasion of the Soviet Union. Our forces are maybe not elite, but they are the most modernized that I'm aware of. And if we're able to just keep moving forward, we are somewhat bogging down, which is a little bit less than ideal. However, if we can just get enough of our forces together to pinch off enough of the Soviets, then we will be in a good spot. We're going to just withdraw from this area, since that is not actually really turning out very well for us. It looks as though the Soviets have managed to defend themselves up in the northern forests. However, it's northern forests in winter, so we can't really say that that's indicating that our military isn't going to be able to do its role, or fulfill its role. What we're going to do now is pull our forces over to the Ukrainian areas and just charge headlong against the Soviet forces here. Now, we know that they have considerable forces up in the center and north of their country, and already we're proving that it's much easier to make progress down south, in part because it's plains, and plains just work much better for our armored and mechanized units, and also in part because it looks as though they don't have as many units here actually defending themselves. So we're just charging through as rapidly as ever. The fact that it's winter is not really slowing us down whatsoever. We're even maybe going to be able to flank around and just destroy a vast number of Soviet units. It'll really depend on the situation on the ground, just how far we're able to flank and how many units we encircle. But we're going to give it a pretty good try and just see what we can do. You'll notice we're focusing up north and not so much on that southern area. That's because the southern area is already encircled. We just went to the sea. If we take Odessa and the other port, then that's basically cut off and can be just destroyed at our leisure. Everywhere else, we're just going to move around and over. It looks as though they are putting up a valiant defense, however, we're just going around it mostly. So yeah, that is really the main goal. We're just thrusting up and around. We're kind of trying to shrink the amount that we're encircling so that we don't have to put so many units just defending that area. And the rest of our forces are just going either south to secure Odessa or north to just see how many Soviet units we can get in this pocket before it's closed. And hopefully it'll be a decent number. We also have some infantry in the south we're going to use. We did encircle and destroy that Soviet force. It was a very small force relative to the overall strategic situation, but every encirclement, minor though it may be, is a step towards victory. And the fact that Odessa and all of that area has been encircled is also a great step forward. So yes, we're just kind of gunning up north again. We had previously been avoiding the north, however, now that we're behind the majority of their forces, we may as well just go up north and hope for the best. That attack, just like previous similar attacks, is just a delaying action so Soviet reinforcements can't arrive in time to prevent us from winning that battle. We're also charging towards the other port in the south. Not really making any advances over towards Crimea and all that, since the lion's share of our forces are going up into this encirclement, which hopefully will be a major one that will deal a tremendous blow to the Soviets' ability to actually fight back against us. And it is working out really in our favor at this point. We're even sending units over to Bryansk. We are being attacked in a way that could get a lot of our troops encircled themselves. Hopefully we're able to turn that around. We're also attacking around Odessa, since Odessa's a bit of a tough nut to crack. Some of their territories on the front line don't even have troops on them, so we're moving into those gaps. Admittedly, some of our frontline territories don't have any troops on them as well, so they can move into those gaps as well. And in fact, two of our units just got encircled inadvertently more than anything else. Hopefully we're able to break free. We're also trying to launch another attack. It doesn't really work, so we're sending units around back up to really just fill in these gaps and prevent our units from being destroyed. It looks as though we might be able to just funnel over. And the rest of the forces, just a few things are going on. Odessa, not much activity there. Over here, we're trying to free these units, get the encirclement dealt with so they can all escape. We are only connected by one province, though, so this whole group could be encircled if the Soviets are bold enough. We also attack Odessa. It doesn't look to be going very well, however, the last province is going well enough. We're also just charging these units out, trying to just encircle whatever we can, destroy whatever we can. If we can cut off those units, all the better. Odessa is now cut off. They can probably just ship out, though. Everywhere else is cut off. And yeah, we're just going to be cutting off as many Soviet units as we can. We move quicker than them. That's not our problem. Honestly, it's just kind of theirs. If they can deal with it, then they can. Odessa, apparently, is just such a hard point we're not going to really be able to succeed there. But everywhere else, that one area, now it's encircled. We are going to just destroy 7 Soviet infantry divisions because they can't escape. Over here, these 14 units are probably fine. And it looks as though once that's all cleared up, all of those units will be free, and they'll be able to just finish the encirclement and destruction of the Soviet forces over in this region. Yeah, so that is basically the goal. The Allies, once again, are just maintaining the lion's share of the front line, the static portions at any rate. We are also kind of trying to stop attacking Odessa. Not really. We're going to keep going, just driving our forces into it. Alright. Looking back, that was a much worse decision. Anyway, though, we are making progress up in the center-ish regions of the Soviet Union, building more factories, just pumping out factories, since the civilian factories are really close to just done producing what we need, so we're just able to expand. Alright, these forces are gunning it forward. This force finally managed to break through. Odessa still attacking that, still just charging into that hard point. Still just sending our tanks into neighborhoods and stuff. Alright, we did manage to encircle those 5 now Soviet forces, which is pretty good. Every small encirclement, especially as it builds up to a major one, is great news. We're also, as I said, building up to a major one. These 2 groups, if they can connect, will just smash a whole group of Soviet forces, which will be just absolutely fantastic. And meanwhile, just moving troops around, we have a lot of new units ready to move to the front line. We're basically at 2 full armored and mechanized armies, which is pretty great news. And in just a moment, this entire portion of the Soviet front line will be encircled and ready to be destroyed at our leisure. And we're probably actually going to take the initiative for destroying that and not just leave it to the Allies, otherwise they'll get all of our precious war score for not really much help. Alright, so that in mind, we are probably going to use a bit of our own troops' lives to just destroy any encircled Soviet forces. Doesn't help us right now, though, since the most important thing to destroying Soviet encircled forces is to actually go and encircle those Soviet forces. So with that in mind, we're charging even further north. Hopefully we'll be able to outrun the fleeing Soviets and maybe even just encircle them in a more outrageous manner, collecting even more of their troops. Every force that they send to try to stop us from encircling their army is just another troop that might end up getting encircled with the rest of their army. So Really, it's kind of great if we're able to pull it off. If we're not, it'll be pretty terrible, honestly. But it looks as though with a 94 on that battle, we are moments away from sealing off most of the Soviet center. And we're also just launching delaying attacks, as we always want to do. We also moved up to mechanized number 2 as opposed to mechanized number 1, so hopefully our mechanized forces will be even better. Smolensk has been seized, although honestly we probably won't be able to hold it very long, depending on whether or not we're able to succeed in these attacks. Our Air Force is still doing very well, despite the fact that we really never invested in it, but the Allies probably invested in theirs, so that's awesome for us. And more armored units, just sending them all up to the front. Still just throwing men into the Odessa, just death pocket. And all of these caught Soviet forces are really just weak enough that we can probably move in and attack them with our standard infantry groups. We also have a few mechanized units, so we're just going to bring them all about and just start collapsing, reducing, destroying these pockets. There are a considerable number of Soviet forces there, so that'll probably throw the KD ratio decisively in our favor. And our forces are just charging up. Vitebsk, more Soviet cities are falling to us as we go on, and their armies are encircled. Odessa still holding on pretty valiantly, I'll grant them that. Everywhere else, though, not so much. And their forces are more or less caught right now. They look to be making a breakout attempt, which would actually work and trap a lot of our units, so we pull back from an attack and get some forces in position. It looks like we managed to hold them off long enough to get some forces there, so that is good news. Everywhere else, though, we're just going to keep going for it. They don't really have supplies. They don't really have the capability of fighting us. We stopped for a moment in Odessa, by the way. And we managed to reconnect with some of our forces a little bit more forward than everyone else. More and more Soviet units are all just being trapped, and we're just really tightening the noose on the entire center of the Soviet just nation. We even have forces up in the north that are carving a path towards the other forces. While we don't really get to see the strategic position, tactically, every single tactical battle is just going fantastic for us. And this encirclement that's about to happen right here, right now, will cut off probably not the most, but a decent number of Soviet forces. So all told, all of these minor encirclements and the occasional massive one have really just gone to almost certainly destroying the Soviet Union's ability to resist. It's already May, so the winter is starting to end. You'll notice that there isn't just ice everywhere. Eventually all the marshlands are going to come back and enforce, which will probably slow down our offensives at least a bit in some areas. However, there we go, more Soviet forces are trapped. We have pushed the front line back so far without actually pushing it back. There we go, we're attacking Odessa and finally winning, although they did evacuate some of their forces by sea. This little pocket is still holding out a little bit, though nothing so considerable that it's really going to threaten us. And yeah, besides that, we're just charging wherever we're able to, kind of getting into the northern forests. These pockets are all being whittled down, and it's just going very, very well. So I was a bit worried, honestly, when the war was declared, that we might actually have terribly underestimated the Soviets, but the Allies seemed to be holding themselves out well in Czechoslovakia. They weren't actively losing or actively winning, which meant that I just kind of assumed we would be the things to tip the balance. And it does appear as though we were. And we're tipping it in just a major way. Once the episode ends, like in all previous recent episodes, I'll bring up the kill-death ratios and just amount of losses sustained. I would not be surprised if ours were just considerably lower than the Soviets. The Allies probably comparable, but our forces are just overrunning and destroying such large swaths of the Soviet military and Soviet territory itself that we're probably doing very, very well in that regard. And at this point, most of these pockets are nearly reduced. We're probably going to just destroy all of these Soviet forces and then call it an episode. So here we go. The sound of our victories as all of these forces are just destroyed. It is just amazing progress. If we can do this a couple more times, the gates to Moscow will be open. Moscow, Leningrad, Stalingrad, once we take those, hopefully the Soviet Union will break. We have 188,000 losses to their 1.3 million. 4 times more than last time round compared to our twice as many more. We are dominating this war. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. We'll be back to continue the war tomorrow.